You do it, Ned. The words were a wet rasp, drowned in the scent of pine needles and spilled wine. Robert Baratheon, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, lay twisted in the mud of the Kingswood, his leg bent at an angle that defied nature. His horse, a magnificent black destrier, lay dead a few feet away, its neck broken in the fall. It wasn't a boar that had done this. It wasn't a battle. It was a patch of wet leaves on a stone, a freak accident on a morning hunt. A king's life ending in a stumble. Ned Stark knelt beside him, his gloves stained with the forest floor. Jon Arryn stood over them both, his face a mask of grim disbelief. Robert, the masters. No time, Robert coughed, a fleck of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. He gripped Ned's arm, his famous strength already fading, but his eyes held a desperate, terrifying clarity. The boys. They're too young. Stannis is Stannis. Renly is a child. It has to be you, Ned. Ned felt a cold dread creep up his spine, colder than any winter wind. Robert, don't speak like that. You'll be on your feet in a week, bellowing for more wine. He tried to force a smile, a useless gesture against the finality in his friend's eyes. Liar, Robert grinned, a shadow of his old self. Always a terrible liar. His grip tightened. Promise me you'll keep them safe. The realm, it needs a Stark, needs your honor. Mine was never enough. His gaze flickered to Jon Arryn. Make him, Jon. Make him do it. Jon Arryn, Hand of the King, looked from his dying foster son to his other, his face etched with a sorrow so profound it seemed to age him in an instant. He knew what Robert was asking. It wasn't just a regency, it was a succession. The Baratheon line was too new, too fragile. Tommen and Joffrey were children, their legitimacy whispered about even now. Stannis was iron, but iron shatters. Renly was summer, and winter was always coming. I will not be king, Ned said, the words tasting like ash. The throne is yours, your sons. My sons! Robert's laugh was a choked, broken thing. He pulled Ned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that only Ned and Jon could hear. What sons? The Golden Lions. They're not mine, Ned. I see it. Everyone sees it, but pretends they don't. The confession hung in the air, a secret that could burn the world. He looked past Ned, his eyes seeing something far away. A crown for a promise. Take it. Keep them safe. Promise me, Ned. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, looked at the man who was more brother than friend. He saw the wars they had fought, the hope they had shared, the love for a woman who was now a ghost between them. He saw the trust in Robert's eyes, a trust so absolute it was a crushing weight. He could not refuse a dying man's last request. He could not refuse his brother. He gave the only answer he could, a slow, reluctant nod. Robert's body seemed to release its tension. A faint smile touched his lips. Good, he breathed. Knew you would. His eyes fluttered closed. The great, booming heart of Robert Baratheon fell silent in the woods, leaving behind a kingdom and a promise that would break the man who made it. The coronation was a somber affair, held under a sky the color of slate. The great sept of Baelor felt cold, its seven-pointed star gleaming down on a king who wore his crown like a prisoner wears his chains. Ned stood stiffly in black wool and gray steel, the simple circlet of the conqueror, reforged from the melted swords of his enemies, feeling heavier than a mountain. He did not want the hymns, the oils, the acclamations. He wanted the cold air of the north on his face. He wanted to be home. Catelyn stood with their children, her face a study in stoic duty. She was a queen now, Her son, Robb, was the crown prince, a future king. Sansa, a princess. Arya, a problem. Bran and Rickon, princes of the blood. It was everything a southern lady might dream of. But Catelyn Tully Stark was of the north now, and she could feel the falseness of the southern sun. She watched her husband, this quiet, honorable man so beloved in the harsh lands he understood, and saw him being swallowed by a world he did not. The first small council meeting was a battlefield of whispers and veiled threats. Jon Arryn, his grief still raw, took his seat as Hand of the King, a rock of stability in a churning sea. Grand Maester Pycelle droned on about precedents. Renly Baratheon, now Lord of Storm's End, sulked, his youthful charm curdled by the slight of being passed over. Stannis, from Dragonstone, had not even deigned to attend, sending a raven filled with clipped, legalistic arguments about succession that amounted to a declaration of silent protest. And then there was the Lannister problem. Tywin Lannister had arrived in the city not with an army, but with something far more dangerous: his ledger. He did not contest the succession. He did not rage or roar. He offered his condolences, his loyalty, and a reminder. The crown, under Robert's lavish reign, owed the Rock more than 3 million golden dragons. "The Iron Bank has its due, Your Grace," Peter Baelish said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. As Master of Coin, the numbers were his domain. But Lord Tywin has been most patient, a testament to his faith in the throne. Ned looked at the smirking man, then at Lord Varys, whose powdered hands were tucked neatly into the sleeves of his silk robes. He felt like a wolf caught in a snare. The crown will honor its debts, but the crown's expenditures will be curtailed. The tournaments, the feasts, they are over. Renly scoffed. "The small folk love the king, brother. A king must be seen. He must be magnificent." "He must first be solvent," Ned replied, his voice flat. He turned to Baelish. "I want a full accounting of all royal assets and expenditures, every last copper." Littlefinger's smile tightened by a fraction. "As your grace commands, it is a labyrinthine task." "Then you had best begin," Jon Arryn said, his voice cutting through the tension. "King Eddard's reign will be one of order and accountability." But as the meeting concluded, Varys lingered. "A noble goal, my Lord Hand. A noble king." He glided closer to Ned. "But a king's enemies are not only found on a battlefield or in a ledger. They are in the shadows. They thrive on secrets." His gaze was unsettlingly direct. "Your Grace has brought a great many secrets with him to the capital." The words were a quiet threat. Ned's mind flashed to a tower in Dorne, to a promise made to a dying sister. A secret that was now a loaded crossbow aimed at the heart of his new-forged kingdom. He gave nothing away, his face a mask of stone. But the spider saw. The spider always saw. The move to King's Landing was brutal. The Red Keep, for all its grandeur, was a prison of sun-baked stone and stifling intrigue. Catelyn found herself navigating a court where a misplaced word was more dangerous than a drawn sword. Ladies whispered behind their fans about her plain northern dresses, about her husband's grim disposition. She was queen, but she felt like an exile. The true source of her misery, the one she could not speak of to anyone, was 1,000 leagues away. Yet his shadow fell over every moment of her new life. Jon Snow. In Winterfell, he was a painful reminder of her husband's one dishonor. In King's Landing, with Ned as king, he was a political catastrophe waiting to happen. A king's bastard, especially one of Stark blood, was a natural rallying point for any lord with a grievance. The argument happened late one night in the Tower of the Hand, where they had taken residence, finding the royal chambers too opulent, too much like Robert's ghost. Ned was poring over tax rolls, a furrow in his brow that seemed to have become permanent. "He cannot stay in Winterfell," Catelyn said, her voice low but firm. Ned didn't look up. "He's safe there. Benjen watches over him." "Safe? He's the bastard son of the king, being raised by the first ranger of the Night's Watch in the seat of the old kings of Winter. How long before some ambitious northern lord decides that a Stark in Winterfell is better than a Stark in King's Landing? How long before they whisper that he has a better claim than Joffrey or Tommen ever did?" This made Ned look up, his gray eyes flashing with anger. No one would dare. "They would," Catelyn insisted, her voice rising. "Because you are honorable and just, and you think all men are the same. They are not. They are greedy and ambitious. You see a boy you have a duty to. They see a weapon. He puts our children at risk, Ned. He puts Robb at risk." The mention of their son, the Crown Prince, struck home. Ned's shoulders slumped. The weight of the world was on them. "What would you have me do, Cat? Bring him here, to this nest of spiders. Let them whisper about him in the halls, stare at him, point. He's a boy." "He is a threat," she said, her voice hardening. She hated the words, hated what this city was making her become, but she saw the danger with a clarity her husband's honor blinded him to. Send him to the Citadel to forge a chain. Send him to the Faith to become a Septon. Or send him to the Wall to take the Black and forswear all claims. Remove him from the board, Ned, before one of your enemies decides to play him as a piece against you. Ned stood and walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city. The smell of filth and flowers drifted up from below. He thought of Jon's face, so much like Arya's, so much like Lyanna's. He had promised to keep him safe. How could he send the boy to a life of celibacy and exile? It felt like a betrayal, but Catelyn was not wrong. The logic was cold, and it was cruel, but it was the logic of kings. "He is my blood," Ned said quietly, his back to her. "And Robb is my son," Catelyn whispered, "and he is the future of this kingdom. You are the king now, Ned. You cannot afford the honor of a simple lord anymore." The chasm between them had never felt so wide. He was the king, and he was more alone than he had ever been in his life. He had made a promise to Robert and a promise to Lyanna, and he was beginning to understand that he could not keep them both. Tywin Lannister did not waste time on anger. Anger was a useless indulgence. When the Raven had arrived at Casterly Rock with the news of Robert's accidental death and Eddard Stark's ascension, he had felt a cold fury, true, but it was the fury of a master artisan whose perfect sculpture had been shattered by a clumsy fool. Cersei, his golden lioness, was meant to be queen. His grandson, Joffrey, was meant to be king. The Lannisters were meant to rule from the shadows of the throne. Now, a grim-faced northerner held the power, a man who thought honor was a shield. Tywin knew it was a target. He played his first move with quiet precision. He did not threaten war. He did not posture. He traveled to King's Landing and presented himself as the king's most loyal and financially significant bannerman. He offered to have his daughter, Cersei, serve as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catelyn, a gesture of friendship that was, in reality, the placement of a spy at the heart of the court. He offered his son, Jaime, the hero of the Kingsguard, as a personal sworn shield to the new crown prince, Robb, an honor that bound the future king to a Lannister blade. Ned, seeking to mend the rift caused by Robert's deathbed confession, accepted. He saw it as a way to bind the great houses together. Catelyn saw the golden serpents being welcomed into her nest and felt a chill. Tywin's real weapon, however, was Littlefinger. The master of coin, who owed his position to Jon Arryn, was a man of immense talent and zero loyalty. Tywin summoned him to a private meeting in the manse he had rented, a place of opulent but cold grandeur. "The king wishes to balance the crown's accounts," Littlefinger said, a wry twist to his lips. "He is frugal." "He is a fool," Tywin stated, pouring 2 goblets of Arbor gold. "He thinks a kingdom is run like a household. He wants to pay his debts, see that he cannot." Littlefinger raised an eyebrow. "A difficult task, my lord. The royal coffers are not bottomless, but with his austerity measures." "Then create new expenses," Tywin said, his voice as soft as silk and as hard as diamond. "Delays in tax shipments from the Westerlands, piracy in the stepstones that requires a naval response. Encourage the guilds to demand new charters, for a fee, of course. A fee that finds its way into the right pockets to ensure the process is complicated. Bleed him. Make him understand that his northern honor is worthless when the moneylenders come calling. When he is desperate enough, he will turn to the one man who can solve his problems. He will turn to me." Littlefinger took a slow sip of wine. He was being offered a new patron, a far more powerful and ruthless one than Jon Arryn. Chaos wasn't a pit, it was a ladder. Tywin Lannister was offering to steady that ladder for him. "And what is it you truly want, Lord Tywin?" Baelish asked, his own ambitions stirring. "The Starks are not easily dislodged." Tywin Lannister looked out the window towards the Red Keep. "Eddard Stark has a daughter, a princess now, a beautiful girl. My grandson, Joffrey, is of an age. He is Robert's acknowledged son. A marriage between them would secure the Baratheon claim and bind the Starks and Lannisters together permanently. It would give my grandson the title of Prince Consort. It would put my blood back where it belongs, near the throne." He turned his pale green eyes, flecked with gold, on Littlefinger. "King Eddard is an honorable man. He will want to do what is best for the stability of the realm. You will help him see that this is the only path. Make him need us, Lord Baelish. Make him need me." The game was set. While Ned Stark was busy trying to scrub the stains of corruption from the kingdom's books, Tywin Lannister was patiently, methodically, rewriting the entire ledger in his favor. The realm did not grant its new king a moment's peace. Word came from the west like a thunderclap. Balon Greyjoy had declared himself king of the Iron Islands. His longships were burning the Lannister fleet at anchor off Lannisport and raiding the coast of the north. The Greyjoy rebellion had begun. For Robert, this would have been a glorious opportunity, a chance to smash his warhammer, to drink, to fight, to be the warrior he was born to be. For Ned, it was a grim, bloody duty. He had no love for war. He had seen too much of it. He called his banners. The lords of the realm, still uncertain of their new king, answered. It was a test, and they all knew it. Stannis Baratheon, master of the royal fleet, bottled up the Iron Fleet at Fair Isle in a brilliant, ruthless display of naval strategy. It was the decisive blow, but the land war remained. Ned led the main host himself, marching on the island of Pike. He was a competent commander, methodical and respected. His men followed him out of loyalty, not fervor. He did not lead from the front like Robert, laughing as he charged. He directed the battle from a command tent, his face a grim mask, moving men like pieces on a civis board. The siege of Pike was brutal and swift. When the southern wall of the castle was breached, Ned was among the first through the gap, ice in his hand, but there was no joy in it. He fought with a cold, deadly efficiency, the memory of the Tower of Joy always lurking at the edge of his mind. War was not glory. It was the butchery of boys who would never see home again. The rebellion was crushed. Balon Greyjoy bent the knee in the smoking ruins of his own hall, his pride shattered. His two eldest sons were dead. As was custom, a hostage was required to ensure his future loyalty. His last remaining son, a boy of 10 named Theon, was brought before the king. In the original course of events, Theon would have been given to Lord Stark of Winterfell. But Ned was not just Lord Stark anymore. He was the king. Theon Greyjoy became a ward of the crown. The boy was brought to King's Landing. He was raised in the Red Keep, a hostage in a gilded cage. He trained at arms with Robb Stark, the crown prince, but he was always aware of the gap between them. Robb was the heir to the Iron Throne. Theon was the son of a failed rebel. He ate at the king's table, wore fine silks, but he saw the glances from the court lords. He was the Kraken, chained in the stag's den, or rather, the wolf's den now. This changed him. Instead of the wild, open spaces of Winterfell, he was surrounded by the paranoia and ambition of the capital. He learned to smile when he was angry, to flatter when he felt contempt. He saw Littlefinger's manipulations, Varys's whispers, Cersei Lannister's simmering resentment. He learned the Southern Game of Thrones not as a Stark, but as an outsider desperate to belong. He developed a desperate, almost pathetic devotion to Robb, not as a brother, but as his link to power and acceptance. Ned, for his part, tried to be a father to the boy, but he was distracted, consumed by the burdens of rule. He saw that Theon was fed, clothed, and trained, a duty fulfilled. He did not see the boy's soul being reshaped by the court's poison. He had won his first war as king, proving his strength to the realm. But in doing so, he had brought another volatile, unpredictable element into the heart of his family and his court. A boy whose desperate need for identity would one day have terrible consequences. Years passed. The reign of King Eddard I was a time of quiet, grinding tension. The realm was at peace, but it was a brittle peace. The treasury, despite Ned's austerity, remained perilously low, thanks to the subtle sabotage of Littlefinger and the constant financial pressure from Casterly Rock. Ned had managed to resist Tywin's proposal of a marriage between Prince Robb and Myrcella Baratheon, or Princess Sansa and Joffrey, but the offer always lingered, a reminder of his dependency. The true weight on Ned's soul, however, was Jon Arryn. His old mentor, his hand, the man who had been a father to him, was growing frail. But his mind remained as sharp as Valyrian steel. With the realm stable, Jon had turned his methodical intellect to history and lineage, a quiet hobby to occupy his fading years. He spent long hours in the libraries of the Red Keep, poring over ancient tomes. At first, Ned thought little of it, but then Jon began asking questions, quiet, probing questions, about the tourney at Harrenhal, about Lyanna, about her final days in Dorne. The confrontation came on a cool evening in Jon Arryn's study. The room was cluttered with books and scrolls. Jon looked older than his years, his skin like parchment, but his eyes were bright with a terrible discovery. "I know, Ned," he said, his voice raspy but firm. He pushed a heavy, leather-bound book across the desk. It was open to a page detailing the Targaryen family line. Ned's blood ran cold. He stared at the book, not seeing the words, only the abyss that had just opened at his feet. You know what? I started with the Baratheons, Jon explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. Robert's confession about Joffrey and the others. It troubled me. I looked into the lineages. The seed is strong, the book says. Black of hair, every Baratheon for 300 years. Black of hair. He paused, letting the words sink in. But that's not what I found. That was just the thread. I pulled on it, and the whole tapestry came undone. He looked at Ned, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored Ned's own. It was never about Robert's children. It was about Lyanna's. Rhaegar didn't kidnap her, did he, Ned? She went with him. They were in love. Ned stood frozen, a statue of northern granite. The secret he had carried for 14 years, a burden that had shaped his entire life, was cracking open. There was a wedding, Jon continued, his voice barely a whisper. I found a Maester's private record, a copy sent from the Citadel, a secret annulment of Rhaegar's marriage to Elia Martell, and a new marriage, performed under a weirwood. A marriage to Lyanna Stark. He finally looked up, his gaze meeting Ned's. The boy in Winterfell, Jon Snow. He isn't your bastard, is he? He is Lyanna's son. He is Rhaegar Targaryen's son. He is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The words hung in the air, a death sentence for them all. It was the truth, the whole devastating truth. Promise me, Ned, Lyanna had whispered, her life's blood staining the sheets of her birthing bed. Promise me you'll protect him. Robert he'll kill him. You know he will. And Ned had promised. He had built his life on that promise. He had lied to his wife, his children, his king, and the entire realm to keep that boy safe. And now, the most honorable man he knew was asking him to break that promise. The boy's existence is a threat to everything you've built, Jon argued, his voice pleading. To the peace, to your own children. But his claim, it is true. By all the laws of gods and men, the throne you sit upon is his. And what would you have me do? Ned's voice was a low growl. Announce it to the world? Declare my entire kingship, the peace of the last 14 years, a fraud? Tywin Lannister would raise his banners before the sun sets. The Dornish would rise for the son of Rhaegar. The realm would bleed, Jon. It would burn. For what? For a law? For a name? For the truth, Jon Arryn insisted, slamming a frail hand on the desk. We rebelled against the madness of a Targaryen king, not against the rule of law. If we set it aside when it is inconvenient, then we are no better than the men we overthrew. He is a boy, Ned roared, his control finally snapping. A boy who knows nothing of this. You would sacrifice him, and thousands more, for a principle? You would build a kingdom on a lie, Jon shot back, his face pale with exertion. They stared at each other, two honorable men trapped on opposite sides of an impossible moral chasm. Ned saw the path Jon was proposing, a path of righteousness that would lead to fire and blood, the very thing he had lied to prevent. He saw his sister's face, heard her plea. He had to protect the boy, at any cost. The lie will hold, Ned said, his voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. The secret dies with us, here, in this room. That is my command, as your king. Jon Arryn stared at him, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound, heartbreaking disappointment. He saw his foster son, the boy he had raised to be the soul of honor, choosing the shadow of a lie over the light of the truth. He saw the king supplant the man. And in that moment, Jon Arryn knew that the Eddard Stark he had loved was gone forever. A few days later, Jon Arryn was taken by a sudden, violent fever. Maester Pycelle diagnosed a sickness of the stomach and administered milk of the poppy. Within a week, the hand of the king was dead. The official cause was his advanced age and the swift, unforgiving illness. Ned was shattered. The loss of his mentor, so soon after their terrible argument, felt like a judgment from the gods. He sealed Jon's study, had his books and papers packed away, and buried his grief under the mounting duties of the crown. He did not see the small, almost invisible smile on Lord Baelish's face during the funeral. He did not know that Littlefinger had arranged for a rare and untraceable poison, the Tears of Lies, to be administered to the hand by a servant in his employ. Littlefinger had not heard the entire conversation between Ned and Jon, but he had heard enough. He had heard the names Rhaegar and Lyanna and the phrase rightful heir. He didn't need the details. He understood at once that Jon Arryn had discovered a secret powerful enough to shatter the kingdom. A stable kingdom under the honorable Eddard Stark was a difficult environment for a man like Petyr Baelish to advance. But a kingdom thrown into chaos by a succession crisis? That was a ladder reaching to the highest heights. So he acted. He eliminated the source of the revelation, and then he planted the seed of a new one. A secret message, carried by a trusted courier, made its way from King's Landing to the Eyrie, where Lysa Arryn, Jon's widow, had fled with her son. The message was from Petyr, the man she had always loved, the man who had promised her everything. It told her that her husband had been murdered. It told her that he had been killed because he had uncovered a terrible truth. And it told her who was responsible: the Lannisters. It was the perfect lie, wrapped around a kernel of truth. Lysa, paranoid and fiercely protective of her son, believed it instantly. Consumed by grief and fear, she then sent her own raven, a message flying from the Eyrie to her sister Queen Catelyn in King's Landing. Catelyn was in the castle's small sept, praying for her husband's soul, which she felt was being eroded daily by the pressures of the crown when the message arrived. She broke the seal and read her sister's frantic, spidery script. "Cat," it read, "Jon is dead. He was murdered. He discovered the truth about Robert's children, that they are not his. They are the Kingslayer's bastards. The Lannisters killed him to silence him. They are plotting against our husband. They mean to kill the king and seize the throne for themselves. Trust no one. Flee." Catelyn stared at the parchment, her blood turning to ice. It all made sense. The Lannisters' ambition, Tywin's cold maneuvering, Cersei's barely concealed contempt, Jaime's constant presence near her son. Robert's deathbed confession, which she had dismissed as the ravings of a dying man. Jon Arryn, her husband's closest friend and advisor, murdered. Her husband, the king, was in danger. Her children were in danger. The truth Littlefinger had manufactured was far more convenient, far more actionable than the real one. The secret of Jon Snow's parentage would have caused a philosophical crisis. The secret of Joffrey's parentage, however, was a clear and present danger. It was treason. It was a knife aimed at her family. Catelyn, who had urged her husband to abandon his honor for the sake of political survival, now had a cause, a righteous cause. She would not let the golden lions devour her Stark wolves. She left the sept not as a grieving queen, but as a woman preparing for war. Ned had been trying to hold the Seven Kingdoms together with honor and duty. Now, Catelyn Stark was about to help tear them apart out of love and fear. Ned was isolated. His greatest ally and moral compass was gone. His wife, once his partner, now looked at him with a mixture of fear and grim determination, armed with a secret that confirmed all her worst fears about the Lannisters. She urged him to act, to expose them, to send for Stannis and Renly and crush House Lannister before they could strike. But Ned hesitated. He was the king. He could not act on the word of a frightened, grieving woman. He needed proof. And in his heart, a colder, more cynical voice, a voice that sounded disturbingly like the king he was becoming, whispered that a war with the Lannisters was exactly what Tywin wanted. A war would bankrupt the realm completely, forcing the victor to crawl to the Iron Bank and the moneylenders of Lannisport. A war would kill thousands. He was trapped. To ignore Catelyn's warning was to risk his life and the lives of his children. To act on it was to plunge the realm into a bloody civil war based on an accusation he couldn't prove. He was paralyzed by the very honor that had put him on the throne. An honorable king could not make a preemptive strike. An honorable king could not condemn a man without evidence. So he did what he did best. He began to investigate. Quietly, cautiously, he started asking the same questions Jon Arryn had. He sought out Robert's bastards, scattered across the city. He saw the black hair, the strong jaws, the Baratheon look in all of them. And he saw the golden-haired, green-eyed Joffrey, who looked nothing like them. The truth of Catelyn's letter was staring him in the face. But knowledge was not power. It was a torment. Exposing the Lannisters would delegitimize the children of the man who had put him on this throne. It would be seen as a self-serving move to remove a powerful rival. The lords would choose sides based on ambition and opportunity, not justice. He was in the godswood of the Red Keep, seeking solace before the pale, weeping face of the Weirwood, when Tywin Lannister found him. The Lord of Casterly Rock did not approach like a courtier, but like an equal. "Your Grace," Tywin said, his voice devoid of warmth, "you are troubled." "The realm has many troubles, my lord," Ned answered, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. "Indeed," Tywin said, his eyes scanning the carved face in the tree. "Debts, rebellions, succession." He paused. "I have heard whispers, vicious rumors concerning my daughter and her children, the kind of rumors that can start wars." Ned met his gaze. The game was over. The pretense was done. "The truth is not a rumor, Lord Tywin." Tywin's expression did not change. "Truth is a matter of perspective and power. You have the crown. I have the gold. A war between us would ruin the victor and leave the kingdom a feast for crows. Is that the legacy you wish for your son?" It was a blunt, brutal threat and an offer. Tywin was not denying the accusation. He was daring Ned to act on it. And in that moment, standing before the heart tree of his old gods, Eddard Stark made a choice. He would not be the honorable fool. He would not be the righteous destroyer. He would be the king. He would be the man who held the realm together, no matter the cost to his own soul. "What do you want?" Ned asked, the words tasting like poison. "Stability," Tywin answered. "An alliance, not of friendship, but of necessity. You need my gold to keep the realm solvent. You need my armies to keep the peace. I need my family's name to be cleared of these rumors. And I need my blood to remain near the throne." His eyes were chips of green ice. "You have a daughter, Sansa, a lovely girl. My grandson, Joffrey, will need a wife. A royal marriage would silence all whispers. It would bind our houses. Prince Rob would be betrothed to my daughter, Myrcella, an unbreakable bond. It was the same offer as before, but now it was an ultimatum. Marry his children to the products of incest and treason, or face a war that would tear the world apart. He would be legitimizing the lie. He would be rewarding the very corruption he had sworn to destroy. He would be placing his beloved daughter in the hands of a family he knew to be treacherous, all to prevent a war that his own honor demanded he fight. He thought of Robb, of Sansa, of Arya and Bran and Little Rickon. He thought of the small folk who would die in their thousands. He thought of his promise to Robert to keep the kingdom safe. And he thought of his promise to Lyanna to protect her son, a secret that would surely come out in the chaos of a civil war. To save everyone, he had to sacrifice his honor, the one thing he had ever truly owned. "The betrothals will be announced," Ned said, his voice hollow. He felt something inside him break. The simple, solid certainty of right and wrong shattered into 1,000 pieces. He had won. He had prevented a war, and he had lost himself completely. The final scene of King Eddard's early reign was not a battle or a trial, but a quiet wedding feast. Princess Sansa Stark, radiant in a gown of white and gray, was married to Joffrey Baratheon in the Great Sept of Baelor. The boy was not made a prince, but was granted the title Duke of the Blackwater, a new and powerful lordship. It was a compromise, a way for Ned to avoid giving the boy a direct claim while still satisfying Tywin. Ned sat on the Iron Throne, watching the celebration. He saw the forced smile on Sansa's face, the smug arrogance on Joffrey's. He saw Catelyn, her face a mask of cold satisfaction, believing her daughter's sacrifice had secured the family's safety. He saw Tywin Lannister, standing beside the throne, looking for all the world like the true king. He had made a deal with the devil, and the price was his daughter's happiness and his own soul. The realm was at peace. The treasury was slowly refilling with Lannister gold. The great houses were bound by marriage. By every measure, his reign was a success. He was holding it all together. But later that night, long after the feast had ended, Ned Stark stood on his balcony, looking out over the dark city. He was the king of the 7 kingdoms, the most powerful man in Westeros, and he had never felt so utterly alone. The crown was not a symbol of power, it was a cage. The peace he had secured was not built on justice, but on a foundation of lies. His lie about Jon Snow, and now the Lannister lie he had agreed to uphold. He had wanted to be a good man and a good king. He had learned too late that he could not be both. He had chosen to be the king, and the good man was dead. And as he stood there, a lone, weary figure, 2 shadows watched from afar. In his web of spies, Lord Varys added this new, compromised king to his calculations, his plans for a different dragon, a queen across the sea, shifting and adapting. And in the cold north, a boy with gray eyes and a direwolf at his side looked up at the stars, dreaming of a life he could never have, unaware that he was the secret truth that could still burn his uncle's carefully constructed kingdom to the ground. The world was quiet for now, but the Game of Thrones was never truly over. So, was he right? Did Ned make the only choice he could? By sacrificing his honor, he saved the realm from a devastating war and protected the secret of Lyanna's son. But in doing so, he became the very thing he despised, a ruler mired in compromise and deceit. Was a peace built on lies truly peace at all? Or was it just a longer, slower path to the same inevitable fire? We leave that for you to decide.